Welcome back to the Winner Circle, everybody. I'm here with Paul from Optery. He is the Chief Commercial Officer for Optery for Business. And this is a really important tool these days. I've looked into it myself. I think I have an account with Optery. I know I do because I get their emails now. So Paul is the latest winner in the cybersecurity, the Fortress Cybersecurity Awards. So congratulations, Paul, and welcome to the Winner Circle.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks for having me on, Russ.
Yeah. So now I know about Optery because I was personally interested for business reasons as well as personal. If somebody that doesn't know this space, what does Optery do and kind of how does it help businesses?
Yeah, so what we do here at Optery, we are what is called a personal data removal tool. And what that means is we're focusing on solving the threats that are laid out by data brokers. If someone's not familiar with data brokers are these companies that sell people's personal information. They'll sell things like your name, your address, your phone number, your family tree for companies or organizational charts, and expose that data on the web while in the process of selling it. So what Optery does is we constantly are scanning those data broker sites and then submitting opt-out or deletion requests at scale to get people's data off of those websites. And in today's day and age of AI-enabled social engineering attacks, this has become a very big problem for enterprises because this exposed data on data broker websites is the number one source for threat actors who are looking to socially engineer a company. And we recently conducted a survey that actually provided data to prove that thesis. So enterprises partner with Optery to reduce the risk around social engineering from this exposed data. If you reduce the exposure of this data, you make your company a harder target for social engineering attacks. A threat actor can't spin up an AI agent and just find all the company employees' email addresses and phone numbers and then start these really convincing social engineering attacks. They'll have to work a little bit harder to find your company's employees if you're using Optery.
Yeah, and I don't know, people think about this, but the hackers go after vulnerable targets, right? Is one, and two, they go after big targets.
Yeah, yeah.
So if they're going to hit, they might as well hit big. And so most of these attacks really do require that social engineering aspect. So you have to know very personal information about somebody or impersonate somebody well enough that it's really, that's convincing. And so I think we've all heard of these stories of, the police in a foreign country calling, the grandpa for, the grandson's in jail or something and trying to get bond for him. And that's, maybe a couple $1,000s. But in these types of attacks that we're talking about on the enterprise, they're convincing people to wire millions, right? It's like, oh, you forgot to pay, Ford Motor Company for tires. We owe them $1 million, and all of a sudden you're down $1 million, right?
Right. You mentioned like the big targets, and certainly the company itself, the company's size or what industry it's in can make it a big target. But the one other thing we're seeing more of, and again, going back to our survey, right, we talked about this a little bit there. So traditionally people thought, okay, well, the big targets are the executives. So we're going to make sure we do this for the executives, right? But what we've actually seen is executives are only the fourth most targeted group. The most targeted group at companies are people in IT or have administrative privileges because of the access to information they have, right? The attackers want to attack them because if they compromise those people's credentials, they can access a lot more than if they access the CFO's credentials, just as an example. The second most targeted team was finance, and kind of along the lines of what you're saying. They target finance because finance can move money. So here's a fake invoice, and if you trick the finance person to paying it, you've got your money. Third, HR, and then fourth were executives. So the biggest fish aren't the most targeted fish necessarily at companies, and I think it's because threat actors want the shortest line to whatever they're looking to achieve.
Yeah. Now you've been in this on this commercial side of this. So Optery has this kind of personal account you can go on and remove yourself from the internet, however deep you want to go. Um, and you're kind of selling this in bulk to the businesses for basically the same reason, but it really protects the business. I very much believe that's true. Um, how many of the CISOs that you go in pitching this to or talking to this about, are hearing about this for the first time?
Yeah, I don't think many are actually hearing about this for the first time, which is good. I think there's the awareness of the problem is there and what the problem means. But I think now what's changed in the last 6 to 8 months, I would say, is that the desire to solve this problem at scale, it has really been what changed. So there's always been awareness, but now they're thinking beyond maybe just protecting executives to thinking about this as part of their enterprise attack surface, right? Each exposed employee phone number or employee email address is a part of is a vector that can be used for social engineering, right? So if I think about this like a cybersecurity practitioner, I remediate these vulnerabilities and I reduce my exposure and my attack surface.
Yeah, and if you don't think phone numbers are vulnerable, I think the latest build of Android, the Android operating system, actually includes basically a device ID in your contact list so that they know the person who's making the call is actually on the device they expect that number to be made from, because hackers can get in there and make it look like your mom's calling you, right? And now with AI, it'll sound like your mom. So these are very, very, very sophisticated attacks. Walk us through how kind of like in a home phone number or a work phone number actually becomes a breach kind of in the real world threats that you're seeing.
Yeah, absolutely. So many companies, there's what's called BYOD, bring your own device, right? So that means on this same device, the access to company email and company applications is sitting right alongside uh, access to the personal email and personal phone number and so forth. So the lowest hanging, the straightforward scenario there is that, well, if I compromise this device by messaging someone's personal phone number or their personal email address, I can then compromise the device and then access any systems that are any company accessing applications on that device, right? So, in that scenario, the targeting is against a personal phone number, not my work phone number if you have two separate ones. But that is what will compromise the device and there and go put the company at risk.
Yeah. Why is this attack surface so overlooked? You know, you think about all the budget that these companies have. It doesn't, this is a relatively, compared to, you know, compared to the bad outcomes, it's a pretty small investment. Why do you think it's kind of been overlooked for so long? Kind of this, getting your data broker data off the internet.
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's certainly one that when Optery started, it was nearly six years ago now. We're like, why aren't people thinking about this? So certainly something that we've been asking for a while. But I think the answer is maybe twofold. The first is uh, cybersecurity as a discipline is more technical. So the initial mindset is let's harden our infrastructure and look at the API endpoints, right? Look at everything from a technical infrastructure perspective and let's make sure that we're scanning everything that's incoming. And that's needed. I'm not saying that that shouldn't be done. That's certainly you have to start with that for sure. I think what maybe tipped the scales and what made people change and not just think about it from a technical perspective is really it is AI because so before you needed a level of you needed some more level of sophistication to start a social engineering attack, right? To get all this data and information together and then start sending emails and bypassing systems and so forth. But with AI and particularly agentic AI now, it's really easy for someone with a lot less technical sophistication than a threat actor of only a couple of years ago to initiate a social engineering attack. Then they'll do it faster. They'll do it at a larger scale. And kind of going back to what you said before, they'll have a more convincing messaging because of the AI's ability to just find other data sources. They'll look at this. If they wanted to social engineer me or you, they'll find this podcast, right? They'll see how I talk, they'll see how you speak, and they'll incorporate that into their attack as well. So knowing that the threat AI has really changed the threat landscape and made this more of an acute threat, they're beginning to think, how do we go upstream? Let's not just do something where all those things we mentioned before are reactive, right? The infrastructure or training, right? That's also the other traditional method against social engineering. Let's train employees to recognize these emails and these text messages. That's reactive, right? That doesn't help an enterprise until the attack has begun. This is saying let's be proactive. Let's reduce the source data available for threat actors. And I think the existence of AI has really inspired this because they see that the attacks are just going to get bigger and faster and of higher quality.
Yeah, and less expensive for the attackers.
Yeah, absolutely. Good
You know,
point.
that's what makes all
Yeah.
this, so wonderful for them. Uh, is all
Yeah.
the same wonderfulness we get, they get, right?
Yeah. AI makes everything, AI increases speed, scale, and can increase quality, right? Whether it's for a good thing or for a bad thing. Yeah.
So you guys have built this platform that removes data from 1,000 or so, sites. You can do custom sites, I know too, that you'll go after kind of, new stuff. What happens then? So you're 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 not done. I can't imagine you're ever really done. You clean it up. Are they rebuilding profiles? What does that look? How does that happen?
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right. They're rebuilding profiles, right? They in some jurisdictions where there's no privacy laws, or even in jurisdictions where there are, they'll the opt out or deletion or whatever may be valid for a year or a quarter. And on day 366, what are they going to do? They'll bring that profile back. The other thing I would say is data brokers aren't really focused on quality of data. It's all about quantity. So I don't know for us if you're a Russell, right? But they might say Russ Fordyce is a one person and Russell Fordyce is another person, and everything else about you could be the same. And they don't care. They'll make sure that Russ has to do an opt out and that Russell has to do one as well. So that's
Oh,
why we're constantly scanning for that, because often it'll come back. Russell come back as Russell, or the profile comes back after the opt out was processed. And the other thing we see a lot of is that these data brokers are just sort of shutting down, rebranding, moving from one shell company to another. So they sort of it's a bit of a game of a whack-a-mole. So we need to be so our technology is constantly scanning these data broker websites, and as we find exposures, we'll submit the opt-out requests.
and so how are you? So you're putting in the opt out requests. And then I imagine you're then following up and kind of getting, hopefully, resolution on that ticket or however they're processing it on the opt out. What sort of evidence are you getting in it to kind of actually prove that that exposure is no longer there for the client?
Yeah, and this is really what differentiates us a lot is that in our platform, our platform has a few different components. The first is really you can think of it as a specialized search engine that is good at finding these data broker profiles. As we find these profiles for an individual, we'll actually provide a screenshot of the exposure and a link to it and provide that into our platform. So you'll know here's exactly what we found. Then we begin submitting our opt-outs, and we have various different methodologies. We use AI, we have API integrations into the larger data brokers to process these at incredible speeds. The opt-out gets processed, then you'll see, okay, that screenshot of your exposure and that link to exposure, if you were to click on it, that link would be dead. And so you wouldn't, so with Optery, we don't just say, hey, we remove your data from 10,000 sites or 1,000 or whatever the number is at the time. You'll see exactly what we found and exactly what we removed. So we don't just say, trust us, we're doing our job. We'll prove it to you every time. And if somehow something's not working, it'll also be very evident to you. And in which case you can reach out to us and say, hey, that's not me, or you said I'm gone, but I still see my data. We have the proof within our platform, and we're always making sure that we're not just grading ourselves, that our customers are grading us.
Yeah, and what's interesting, I think about the commercial angle of this and your role there, and kind of that product set. It, it's really almost self selling if you can go into an executive to go into a CISO and go, look, your IT guy sitting next to you. Here's everything about him, right? Or here's your CEO's personal phone number. I mean,
Yeah,
you start getting into that. It's I'm sure you've seen a lot. What surprised you the most about how much of an executive's personal data is actually out there?
I don't know if anything surprises me anymore, Russ. Frankly, like I found data from my grandparents out there, and they've never been on the internet, right? So I don't know if any much surprises me. I think as we're engaging with CISOs and executive teams, it is similar to, like, as a consumer, you can sign up for Opera. We'll do the free scan. You can see what's out there, and if you decide you want us to remove it, you can sign up for a paid account, and we'll start doing that. With enterprises, we often do something similar where it is exactly the example, like you said, the CISO or someone in the security organization will partner with some other exec and say, hey, let's see how much data of yours is out there. So if you're a cybersecurity practitioner and you explain this to some one of your peer, or if you're the CISO and you explain this to one of your peers in the C-suite, they'll get what you're saying, and they'll say, okay, yeah, it seems like we should do something about this problem. But it hits differently when the CFO or the CEO sees their phone number, the name of their spouse, the name of their children. They're like, whoa, okay, this is a problem we need to solve, right? So there is that that direct emotional tie, or whatever you want to call it. So we do that does apply for the enterprise sale as well. But I can't say something surprises me. These data brokers, they're always doing something crazy or
Yeah, and
interesting.
I mean, if anybody hasn't ever done it, do a Google search. And by the way, Google search is one thing, and now you need to do an AI search, right?
Right.
Because AI search is a completely different animal. And I think, what the AI is able to come up with is a very different result than a typical, web search. So it's ever changing, it seems too.
Yeah, and
Now,
that's why you need to be constantly scanning for and removing the data, right? Because it's going to be
yeah.
in different places. We're always adding more data brokers, right? So the number of data brokers we support is constantly changing and going up as we find more and productize more of these.
Yeah, and you're at the mall and you sign up for a free car, all of a sudden there's new data about you, you know? So it's
That's literally how it works. Yes.
it's literally how it works. Now you
Yeah.
describe the tool as kind of a human plus machines. Why not fully automate the removals?
Yeah, that's a good question. We try to automate as much as possible because it is faster and cheaper. But there are times where you need a human in the loop. You mentioned before, right? We're following up with them because it's not always perfect in this space, right? And no vendor should claim that it is. So we do have a team of what we call privacy agents that back up our technology and will QA the AI to make sure it's doing everything the right way, or if we need to have a back and forth with a data broker, escalate a request or something like that, there's a human in the loop to do so. So it does help to have a set of humans backing up our technology.
As a marketer and sales guy, and you're in sales as well, sometimes we want our numbers out there. Do you ever get into situations where they want their data updated?
Uh, I've gotten that question a couple of times, and the way I respond to it is, well, give me the reason why you want a company who you don't know and never gave permission to have your phone number and email address out there, right? I want the information about me. You're right, I'm in sales. You can find me on LinkedIn and you can figure out what city I'm in and all that sort of stuff. But I'm controlling that, right? I'm choosing to post that information on LinkedIn. I didn't tell Apollo or Zoom Info like, hey, here you go. Here's my phone number and here's my team's org chart, right? If you want to find me, you can find me on LinkedIn and reach out to me. And I work in sales, so yeah, I will read these messages and and reply as I see fit. But the phone numbers and the email addresses, that's I didn't give anyone permission to just post those, and then not only just post those on their own, combine that with other data they may have about me, right? The thing that data brokers do just that. They might start with a phone number that they obtained because someone went to the mall and signed up for something, as you said, but then they'll combine that with some other data source as well. They could be the public records, right? There was security through obscurity in the sense, right? You like a marriage record, fishing license, they're public domain, yes, but the counties aren't sitting there indexing them on Google. There's a request and a FOIA request or some process to go through. What data brokers will do is they'll go through they've gone through said processes, and then they'll combine that data with whatever you might have put at the form on the mall or the website you signed up at. So that's the other reason you don't want this sort of data out there. If you're a salesperson or you work in sales and marketing like we do, you'll find a way to be found, but that doesn't need to be some company just putting your personal cell phone number and the name of your spouse and children on a website for sale.
Yeah, and I would say if you really want it that bad, you can go fill out some stuff at the mall, right?
Yeah. Wherever you can find them all, that's still there, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's true too. Now, you guys open source what was called, I think, a data broker directory. Give us kind of the reason for doing that.
Yeah, so obviously you can pay for our service and we'll remove data, but we fundamentally believe privacy is a right here at Optery. So our open source data broker directory is the largest of its kind. And what it does is that we have a product team that's focused on this ecosystem and our integrations into it. So with that knowledge, we decided that we should make that knowledge public and available. So what the open source data broker directory does is it lists the data brokers, discusses a little bit about what type of data they process, and provides you information as to how someone can self-service opt-outs, because we know not everyone can afford our service, or might be willing to pay, but that doesn't mean we think that they don't deserve privacy. So we wanted to create a resource for the whole ecosystem, so that people can get educated about the problem and also work to solve the problem on their own if that's what they want to do.
Yeah. Well, it's very noble and a very good thing to kind of give back to everybody, especially if they can put it to use. If it just gives them vision too. I know that the free sign up on your website gives you very good vision of what's out there. It's quite remarkable. If anybody's listening and hasn't done Optery, Optery, if you're on audio only, it is definitely worth doing. Where do you think this personal data removal kind of industry is headed in the next 5 years or so?
Yeah, I think, you know, there's two things I think top of mind. I think the first is what we hit on before. Companies are going to view this as part of their cybersecurity stack, just with their EDR and all the other technical solutions. This is going to be a key part of a cybersecurity stack. I think we're going to see that happen pretty quickly over the next couple of years. I think the second piece I think is it's interesting to see how this will play out with more and more jurisdictions adopting privacy laws. But will and I don't know if I have a prediction here, but I think the ability for the right now the consumer, the individual, the data subject has very little control, especially in the U.S. But I would argue even in a place like Europe with a law like GDPR, they still don't have as much control. But it's potentially going to shift to, all right, how can the industry, how can solutions out there enable consumers to really gatekeep where their data goes? I think that's something really interesting that we're keeping our eyes on over the next few years and seeing, is there an ability to do that, especially with AI and how AI just flipped the script in terms of, AI is making the open web less open, if you think about it, right? And The open web is really what fueled this rise in data just going all over the place. I used to work in advertising and marketing technology, so I learned plenty about that, and that's really what brought me here to Optery, is like learning that problem and now working on solving the consequences of it. But I think that will be the other piece of this, is how can consumers have more control over, hey, my data should go here or should not go here.
Yeah, and the thing I think I really I would stress to people too, and I know it's a subscription business, but it's not a once and done thing. It's insurance policy if you're really trying to do it because we have in our business, we have people come in and out of that stream, our marketing stream voluntarily, in and out. And so, you're getting on my list and getting off my list. It's the same as a data broker. They're buying stuff from all over and getting, you don't think you gave it to somebody somewhere, but your car insurance sold it to them or something like that. And it's constant. It is a
Yeah, it
constant battle if you're really going after it.
Yeah, it's that same mindset shift that we talked about in business, right? As a consumer, you don't uninstall your and cancel antivirus when you get a clean scan, right? You want it there, making sure there's nothing on your computer, no malware or anything like that. And I think you need to think about your data the same way. It's going to get out there, and I think that's what some people are like. Well, my data's out there. It's going to get out there. That doesn't. You have more control than you think, and you need to be proactive about this problem, and you make yourself a harder target for the threat actors.
Yeah. Well, Paul, fascinating conversation. Super important that people, at least consider this, start doing those Google searches and AI searches on yourself to see what's there. And if it's anything near, personal information, you really ought to consider doing something like Optery to get it off of there because it is rapidly becoming, a very easy attack surface for people. And all these attacks have always been really almost reliant on social media or on social engineering. They're not brute force attacks anymore until we get to the quantum age. But the social engineering is really what makes this work, and you can't do it without data. So, really, thank you for coming on, and congratulations on the award. Really well deserved.
Thank you, Russ. Thanks for having me on, and I appreciate the kind words.